everybody. Welcome back to Author Eke. Today I have Tim. And Tim and I have some similarities. He's an armor officer, then an MI officer, and I was a scout. So we hang out with the Army guys a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Normally in front of them or back when it was cold because the tanks are really warm.
Fire up that engine.
Yeah, oh my God.
Please.
Pick our food.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to let Tim introduce himself. He has an extensive background. I want to thank you very much for your service you've done for the country. And
Thank you as well.
Take it away. Let's tell everybody about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Tim. I go by T.R. Hendricks is my pen name. Hail from Long Island, New York. I've been basically in one facet or another working in the private security industry most of my time after leaving the military.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really my main goal in life, was to be an Army officer. I did ROTC, went in as a lieutenant right at 2003. So right as the Iraq War was getting underway. And I was in basic during the initial movement to Baghdad. And then I was part of the relief force in 2004.
Excellent.
We call it OIF2.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, they were numbering every rotation back then, not realizing it was going to go on 20 years, you know.
Really?
So it was like, oh, you know, by 5 we'll be done. And like, yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah, that was OIF2. And but yeah, I did another rotation 07, 08, and then got out and worked, you know, through the civilian industry and just kind of found my place. You know, some jobs worked, some jobs didn't, but always in the back of my mind, I had the goal of becoming a published author, you know, and so I was always doing that. That was like a hobby, a great escape for me. You know, as well as I do, when you're on deployment, there's a lot of downtime, you know, so I would fill in that time through kind of my own imagination and whatnot. And what started as a hobby really, you know, developed into a goal to become a published author, traditionally published author is really what I set my sights on. And, you know, happy to say that earlier this year, my first novel, The Instructor, came out and in April, and we're eagerly awaiting the release of The Infiltrator, which comes out in April of 24. So
Excellent.
That's the real brief once over.
So, you know where Hauppauge is?
Sure. Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I remember I worked for a company called EDS at the time.
Okay.
And they had a huge facility out there. And I flew from Dallas to do some training to teach a class, a Microsoft class. And I remember I went to it was a Bennigan's or some restaurant. That was right after that TWA flight fell into the deck.
Oh, yeah. TWA 800. Yeah.
I got caught in that wake.
Wow.
And
okay.
So I just remember sitting there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm eating, and there's a couple ladies talking over there. And man, I thought I could throw out some F-bombs.
Oh.
Holy. I thought Fran Drescher was next to me.
Yeah. I mean, they put truckers and sailors to shame over here.
Wow.
You get a Long Island Italian woman fired up, forget about it. That's it.
I was like, I'm going to write some of these down. I haven't heard these.
They will strip the hide off your back with those. Yeah. Absolutely.
But lovely women they are. So I just want to say they're lovely women they are.
100%. Absolutely. A very near dear family that is 100% Italian and Sicilian. So, yeah.
So how do you get your inspirations for your book? Is it based on your military or things you've done, or where do you get that? And how does it come to you? Like, oh my God, I'm gonna write something, and here it goes. And
this one. So it's funny. I started as a fantasy author because that's where I read a lot of my stories. It was like that.
Well, you were in the Army.
Yeah. When the rubber meets the road, right? Like. Work my whole life to getting in, and then I get in, I go, wait a second.
This is nothing like they said. What?
This isn't what it's supposed to be. It's probably why I was like the gung-ho number one cadet, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I was going to be a 5-star, not a 5-star, but a 4-star general one day. That was, you know, I had like those aspirations.
Yeah.
And then I got boots on the ground. I was like, I'm out of here, especially when people started shooting back. Forget that, you know.
I need to pop smoke. I need to
Yeah, exactly. Let's do a tactical retrograde on that
exactly.
So it was kind of funny because guys that I graduated and got commissioned with,
Mm-hmm.
they're all hitting like lieutenant colonel and full
Right.
bird right now. And I was out after, 4.5, close to 5 years. I was out,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all like, "What happened? You were like the man back in ROTC." I was like, rubber didn't meet the road for me, at least.
Excellent. Excellent.
But yeah, so part of that like escapism that I was mentioning earlier, was being able to pick up a book and be transported to a world not of our own, it was always something that was attractive to me because I loved the talent of these authors that could just
Yep.
invent entire worlds and peoples and cultures and philosophies and conflicts that go back
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years, and I just became immersed in them, these 12, 13, 15 book series.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always kind of drawn to that stuff as a kid. I liked, knights fighting dragons and shit
Mm-hmm.
like that. So
Yep.
that's what I would toy around with in my writing. And
Right.
I was going and going and going, and those stories they kind of just develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what if I did this? What if I did that? And the Instructor was my first ever foray into the thriller space.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had avoided it for so long because I thought it would be more difficult to write a story that exists within the parameters of our world. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much easier to just make up a whole world. I have
Yep.
total control over everything. If I want to call that thing a gobbledygook, who's going to stop me?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
there's no precedent on it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not the best word choice, but it's
Right.
it's the limit is your imagination. And I'm like, if I have to write something that takes place in the United States, we're confined to it. Like, we're
Mm-hmm.
confined to all the rules of gravity and what things
Right.
are already named and but when I actually started writing it, I was like, wow, this is easy because this is all we've known. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for my 42 years on this planet, like I'm
Right.
intimately familiar with this, whereas something
Right.
that I'm creating in my
Yep.
imagination, it's like, oh, that doesn't necessarily work.
But even though
So,
you can have a little bit of leadway, even in a thriller fiction, if you're from a technology perspective or
yes,
personalities and things
for
like that.
sure. Like the number one thing that I always remembered from a creative writing class I took in college was the reasonable suspension of disbelief. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like people will give you that latitude to
Yep.
invent some new piece. Like in the sequel, I think I've got the main character's got like this enhanced. It's essentially an iPhone, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like an enhanced computer that he keeps on his wrist top, and he's
Oh, cool.
typing and tracking. He's
Mm-hmm.
typing in situation reports and GPS, and
Yep.
he's all these great things.
Yep.
And like that's not so far of a stretch of the imagination
No.
for somebody to say, yeah, I can see this guy having a super advanced wrist top computer.
Well, if somebody says, "No, that's impossible," say, "Go back and watch Star Trek."
Yeah, exactly. Or like, to take it even further back, go really old school, like remember the Dick Tracy comic
Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
where they're sitting there talking into the watch. And it
Exactly.
was like, oh, that would never happen. And now, you've got your iWatch and you can,
Yep.
intercom somebody downstairs from you. So
You can talk in your house and get a response like, what?
yeah,
It's crazy.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't feel like getting off the couch, and I buzz my daughter, hey, come in here, get the remote, I can't reach it,
Right over here.
Yeah. So, the funny thing with the Instructor, when that idea came to me, I was writing short stories at the time
Uh-huh.
because that was like I didn't think my skill set was up to snuff yet to really dive into, not that I wasn't writing full length novels. I was,
Right.
I wasn't ready to put them out there yet. So
Right.
I
Right.
was
Okay.
kind of like honing my skill, if you will, and experimenting, trying out new
Mm-hmm.
things. One short story was like, I want to make people feel bad for Darth Vader. And I wrote
Right.
this whole short story about Darth Vader not dying at the end of Jedi, but
Mm-hmm.
being captured and then executed,
Mm-hmm.
by the rebellion. And I had people like sad, feeling bad
Right.
for Darth Vader. It was like
Right.
arguably the worst villain in the history of, villains, or one
Yeah.
of them anyway.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I was doing. I was experimenting with short stories, and I had this little fledgling website where I would throw them up once a month. And I was getting really good feedback. And just so happened at the time, a coworker who happens to be a retired Marine wilderness survival instructor and has his own school, he teaches in northern Jersey. It's called K-12 Survival Solutions. Great guy.
Okay.
He and I were working together in a private investigations firm, and he was the director of investigations, and I would support him on some stuff occasionally. And we were just joshing. Also, he's a veteran, 20-year, retired Marine Corps warrant officer. So we were just BSing one day during the coffee break, and he tells me, I almost had my own survival show, like Les Stroud or Bear Grylls. And I was
wow.
I was like, oh, that's really cool. What happened? And he said the producers of the show wanted to use his, he had a very, very niche top secret job in the military, like above top secret SCI,
compartmentalized all that stuff.
Yeah, he was really read into a lot of stuff, and he couldn't talk about it, obviously, nor would he, because he's a man of integrity and everything.
Yeah.
But the producers wanted to basically say, let's take something from your top secret military career, and then we'll transpose it into the episode, and you can show how your survival skill helped in that situation, something to that effect.
Right.
And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's you're asking me to divulge.
I'd be surviving in Leavenworth.
Yeah, exactly. You're asking me to divulge national secrets for television ratings.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And they basically canned him. They said, well, we're not moving forward. So while that was happening, in the back of my head, the wheels start turning, like that inspiration hits, right? And I'm like, you know what? If you want, what we'll do is I'll write a fictional bio for you. Completely made up, but we can do the whole based on a true story thing. And you can take it back to Hollywood and, go wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, I'm not saying this was me, but it might have been me. And maybe, that's thing. And I don't think anybody had any idea or intention of that actually moving forward from more than a chuckle, And so this guy, Rob, my buddy Rob, he's like, yeah, whatever, Tim, go ahead. You want to write a backstory? Here's kind of like my resume. Go ahead and have fun with it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I started writing this bio, and then the bio turned into like a 5-page short story. And then the thing just took a life of its own. And
oh, wow.
I would come in with chapters and I'd be like, Rob, check this out. And he'd be like, dude, this is pretty cool. He's like, where are you going to go with this from now? I'm thinking like we need
the next chapter.
Yeah. I'm thinking what we need to do is something like this and this. You're like, yeah, man, go for it.
Yeah.
And boom, next thing you know, the first draft of the Instructor was written, refined it a little bit. And then I went out in search of an agent, and the rest is history from there.
So how'd you do that? How'd you go out and search for an agent? Because they're a lot of standoffish, or if you don't know somebody in the industry, or it can be tough.
I would say that can be true with the industry as a whole, but I also feel like that is kind of a stereotype that agents and the agent, like the literary agency world, kind of gets labeled with. In my experience, I found that it's not so much like it's like any other company, right? Some companies have their stuff wired tight.
Yeah.
They're just humming along, and other people are stuck in the Stone Ages, or they're inefficient, or there's egos involved, or whatever. And it just kind of like depends on how, I've queried literary agencies that I've never heard back from. You hear stories from people that receive rejection notices 3 years after their novel is published that they originally pitched. It's like,
oh, thanks.
So like, it's like, oh, okay, well, I hate to let you know.
Man, that mail is slow.
Yeah, thanks for getting back to me finally. And some of that is on the industry, the publishing industry as a whole. There's a propensity, I think, to shy away from updating their practices, because that would take away from what is a very stressful machine of constant need for publication, and we could talk about
a puppy mill,
the investiture of money into advanced technologies for tracking and stuff like this, and that shortens margins and what's already a tight margin. So there's a whole business side of it, but I digress.
Yeah.
I just went through the process. I had actually queried a book beforehand that I really shouldn't have. Like before I wrote the Instructor, it was my first foray where I was actually like, I have something here. I think I've got the chops to make it, and I just fumbled through the whole query process. Like it was by by no means should I have ever put that book out into the
Right.
world in the state that it was in.
Right.
Um, and just simple things like I was sending the manuscript out and didn't have my name on it. I was sending the manuscript out and it was in like 11 font single spaced for like
Oh, wow.
300 something pages like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like the old adage with your resume. Like, an HR person is going to get 200 resumes a day and they whittle it out just by if you have a spelling error. There's just can't,
Yeah.
they have to
There's
shrink
a
the
way they have to narrow it
pool.
down. Oh, yeah.
Right. A little, they have to find a way to do that. And that thing failed miserably, rightfully so. Because people probably open it and be like, what the heck is this? I did get 2 full requests for it based off the query letter, but never heard back from anybody. But that was an important exercise in learning the ins and outs of how to do this, how to properly format your manuscript, how to cater your query letter to the specific agent that you're looking to attract their attention. Doing the necessary research to figure out, is my book even a fit for this agent?
For the company,
yeah. Because if you go in there with I'm just going to write a blanket cover letter. You might make it past the front gate. I don't know.
Right.
If you are going to say, well, this agent doesn't represent my genre or represent my age group, but you know what? They're going to make an exception for me. Guess what? You're out of there. Agents don't have time.
Yeah.
They do not have the time. They're reading their clients' books. They're reading submissions. They're doing newsletters and podcasts and all these other things to grow there, but they don't have the time. The industry is just too crazy that way.
Right.
So I got picked up off the slush pile. I sent my query letter into my agent, Barbara Powell. She's phenomenal. Now has her own shop, Word One Literary, and basically, my letter went on the desk. And this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier about some people are better at their efficiencies than other.
Right.
And I'd say, within a few months of sending out my query, within the reasonable time that you would expect at least a rejection or some kind of response, she requested the fall. I think her specific request was either for my first chapter or my first 10 pages, along with my query letter.
Right.
And then she requested the fall. And then after that, I got the call. We did some conversations, and lo and behold, she offered the representation. So yeah, so you can do that. I mean, there's many paths to representation. You can go to the conferences and pitch to agents directly, and some people land it that way. But I don't know. A lot of people I've met have just done it by the good old sending out that letter.
Yeah. Because I'm actually looking for a literary agent now for our next historical fiction.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do, but yeah. So that's interesting. So
it's a process for sure. And to be honest, I was one agent away from shelving the project completely. I thought I could maybe bring it back out at a later time, because some of that also, you might have the greatest novel that's ever been written in the history of mankind, but if the market doesn't want that right now,
then
you're not going to get picked up.
Exactly.
So sometimes you have to put the work in. Of course, you could be the most talented writer, but you have to put the effort in. You have to have the drive. You have to have a thick skin, and you have to press on in the face of these rejections. But sometimes the stars just have to kind of align the right way too.
I believe, I think you're right.
And I was very fortunate in that regard, both with Barbara representing me, and then further on when Robert Davis, my editor, picked me up for Tor Forge. It was like, hey, I really want this military thriller, but I don't really want it to be an international, and I kind of like something that's takes place outdoors more than in the city.
Mhm.
And Barbara was like, "Oh boy, do I have a story for you?" Like, I mean, I couldn't believe my ears when she told me
Excellent.
that. I was like, "You're kidding me, right?" He asked for that. He asked for it without
Then you
knowing
start
that.
looking around for, like, okay, where's all the cameras and all
Yeah,
the listening
exactly.
devices?
Like,
Like, uh-oh,
yeah,
Big Brother.
I'm on a candid camera show. Like, okay, when are they gonna pop out and say just kidding?
Alexa, Alexa, where are you?
Right? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So
So tell us about the new book coming out.
yeah, so the new book is called The Infiltrator.
Mhm.
It picks up roughly roughly about a year after the events of The Instructor.
Okay.
Um, and I don't, I want to frame this in a way that's not giving away too many spoilers, but
Mhm.
basically the plot of The Instructor, which is based around the suspicion of this domestic terrorist group that
Mhm.
hires Derek Harrington, my protagonist, to teach them wilderness survival.
Mhm.
And he starts to unravel pull on the thread and unravel this plot that he's believed in. That story is very centrally located around the enemy camp in upstate New York.
Okay.
Now we really start to broaden things out in the
Mhm.
Infiltrator. We find out that this wasn't an isolated
Mhm.
camp. There's multiple locations. It
Which is
becomes
not too far fetched because they had one in New
yeah,
Mexico.
exactly.
Yeah.
There is that was another thing. I did not intend it to be this way, but it
Right.
became very timely, the
Mhm.
manuscript, because you had a lot of these camps, these kind of
Mhm.
revolutionary camps, these,
Yep.
doomsday prepper types, people that are wishing the next American Civil War. I don't know why anybody would ever wish for, the slaughter of your neighbors, but,
That's beyond me.
it's,
That I don't get. I'm
I
sorry.
don't touch that one.
I don't get that.
But there was also several articles about the radicalization of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans,
Mhm.
especially Afghanistan guys,
Mhm.
because guys and gals, I should say, because they were coming back and in a very vulnerable state
Mhm.
mentally, and these groups were snatching them up based on the training that they have,
Mhm.
and they wanted to absorb that U.S. military doctrine, but at the same time, you're getting these individuals that felt that like they were betrayed by their country and they were used and they weren't given the chance to win, or their friends died for nothing. All those very
Right.
extreme emotions were churning up in them, and you find I was finding more and more articles based in truth of you know people or groups that had that kind of ideology, and I was like,
Mhm.
this is something that we gotta keep an eye on here,
Oh
because
yeah.
when everybody's worried about what's coming from overseas, we've got stuff brewing in our backyard, and that's kind of where I went with the story. I was like, wouldn't it be interesting
Mhm.
to write a fiction thriller novel exploring those ideas and seeing how it might unfold? And so
Yep.
in the sequel, you see that happen. Um, Everything's just on like a grander scale. The
Mhm.
FBI is involved, much more. The FBI is involved in the first one too, but the FBI
Right.
is, it's kind of a um, not a global scale, but a national scale
Mhm.
that the operations are going on, and
Yep.
the group that they're pursuing is essentially on their last legs. They're on the ropes,
Right.
and that I'm a big boxing fan, right? And so when
Right.
somebody's on the ropes can be one of the most dangerous times for you as a fighter, right? Because that's when they're desperate.
Right.
That's when they just start throwing crazy
You're gonna wail at you.
haymakers. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And you see the guy that you're like, wow, this guy has been winning for 11 rounds, and then he gets caught flush because the guy was just, his opponent was backed into a corner, and
That's that
that's
survival instinct or that corner
yeah.
dogs, where you got, okay, I got to come out of here and I've
Exactly.
got to
Yeah.
come out with
It's like if we don't
hard.
fight with everything that we
Yeah.
have, we're dead.
Right.
So that's kind of the
Mhm.
overarching theme
Excellent.
of the second book, and I have books 3 and 4 planned. I actually started drafting the first one of 3, but this is basically a 4 book storyline
Okay.
for this particular story. And then I've got some ideas of how to spin Derek off into, kind of standalone stuff, or maybe some of
Yep.
my supplementary characters. Especially there's a husband and wife duo in the sequel that I love,
Right.
Maureen and Al, where they are they're like in their 60s now, but they're basically 60s, but they're basically retired CIA operatives, and they used to get deployed all over the world
Right.
as a married couple, to perform missions that would fit that skill set. I
Right.
would love to write, a whole subset of books or stories based on
Oh, you
those
could.
two
You could go with
guys.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a character that I created in the second book, Cobalt, and I was about halfway done with the third, and I made her very prominent because she's a CIA agent,
Right.
but she's also a trained chef from the CIA, Culinary Institute of America.
That's awesome.
So she's an assassin, and her method of termination is food poisoning,
I was gonna say
because she can
poison,
get the CIA can place her in any restaurant in the world
Right.
because she has a pedigree.
That's too
And it
funny.
never ties back to the restaurant. So that then I got halfway done, and last week I go, man, I had an idea, and I go, holy cow! And so I'm writing this historical fiction of World War I, but I feel I just got to get it out.
Yeah.
So I kind of put this one on the back burner for a little bit, and then when this one's done in the editing, then I'll go back and finish that one.
Yeah.
Because I just feel this is. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way. I just do a ton of research. Now, this historical fiction, there's got this, it's a lot. I have got pages of things of research. I bought books. Right. I want the uniforms correct. I want everything to be. The story is out there, but it's just about that. So I mean, you sure you have to do a lot of research in your books?
100%, because to me, like one of my I want to write a kick-ass story. I want to write a barn burner that people are telling me I was up till 3 a.m. or
right.
Oh my God, that scene with the cages, little teaser there for everybody, that scene with the cages. Oh my God, like I'm having nightmares. I'm like, oh cool, I inspired nightmares, but the biggest thing, that probably the second biggest thing, or maybe even like a 1A, 1B to me, is the authenticity, right? And that was always my hang up with writing a contemporary story that takes place in our world versus the fantasy story, right? Because I better be sure that I'm getting this stuff right, especially I was a history major in college, big military history fan. And I know the enthusiasts that are in that space.
Oh, they'll rip you apart.
And like, if you're saying that your guy was using a 7.62 by 33 Mauser cartridge, and they'll be like, well, that didn't actually come out until 1919, and in August of 1919, and you had it in September of 1917.
Yeah.
And to me, you lose credibility, right? It shows like, okay, this guy wrote some stuff and didn't bother to do the research. Yeah, laziness, right?
Yeah.
One thing that just popped in my mind real quick was like this woman who was a historian herself, and she wrote this whole book, and she was doing the press release on it, and basically the historian that she was doing the podcast with to promote the release of this book, the historian's like, yeah, you interpreted all these documents that you cited, you interpreted them completely wrong. All your theories are wrong. And he demonstrates it for her live.
Oh my God.
On the episode. And it's just like, holy moly. And there was like it was no argument, because it was, he presented the counter evidence, and it was just incredible.
Oh my goodness.
Not to say that like my, military thriller is never going to reach that level.
Right.
And you do get to have that leeway where you get to play with stuff a little bit, but just things. And this was really kind of the fun of like I said, when I first started writing The Instructor, it was based loosely off my friend who was a Marine. So I started writing a Marine Corps guy, right? But I'm former Army. I spent 5 years in the Army and 4 years as a cadet. And so like all my terminology and knowledge and everything is fine. And it's very similar with the Marine Corps, but there's definitely differences. I mean, you've been around Marines before,
Yeah, they say
right? So,
aye and
yeah,
head, and
yeah,
there's a little bit differences.
yeah, your bathroom or your latrine is a head, your
Yeah,
doorway is a hatch,
right.
the floor is the deck, like
Yep.
all that sort of stuff. And now I'm in a place where I forgot this book, and I'm like, oh man, like in the Instructor. There's a part where his elderly father, Derek's elderly father, who has like early onset dementia
Mm-hmm.
and Alzheimer's, but Derek is like admiring his bed in his father's bedroom because all of the folds of like
Squared.
the
Yeah,
sheets and the
yeah.
blanket and everything is folded down perfectly to the measurements that you would do as a recruit in basic
Mm-hmm.
training. Well, I had to spend about 2 hours making sure that the Marines fold their shit the same way that the Army does.
Oh, I know.
Because I'm going to get, if I said it was 18 inches from the pillow to the first fold or something, I'm going to get some Marine somewhere is going to go, hey, it's not 18
That's not
inches,
right.
it's 12 inches. This
That's
guy
not
doesn't
right.
know
Yeah.
shit, So, and so you had that with that
Yeah.
aspect with the Marines, which I love the Marines. I love the rivalry. I come from a whole family of everybody serving in the Army
Yeah.
except my father, who the book
Mm-hmm.
is dedicated to. He's the
Mm-hmm.
only Marine. He insists that the rest of us are wrong, and he was right. So
my whole family was Air Force. I was
yeah,
like the only one to go in the Army.
right.
Like,
I love it. It's a great dynamic and everything. But you had that whole aspect of making
mm-hmm.
sure everything was right to the Marine
Yep.
Corps standard. Then you have this huge, explosion of people
Mm-hmm.
into survival, right? On
Right.
all sorts of facets, whether they just go on hiking and they
Mm-hmm.
want to know basic first aid
Yep.
and fire making, or all the way up to your preppers that are
Mm-hmm.
preparing for the end of the world and are building self-sustaining homesteads and everything.
Yeah.
And
They
there's
have
nothing wrong with any of that.
cachet of food and ammo spread
Yeah.
wherever they're going to go. Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
not taking away from any of it.
But,
Some days I'm like, I want to pull up stakes and move out and, and create a cache, and live in the woods
yeah.
permanently. But certainly like there is that regard too,
Mm-hmm.
where like, oh, you described this not wrong.
Right.
That trap would have never been sprung with that kind
Mm-hmm.
of knot. You needed this kind
Right.
of trigger or whatever. So yeah.
Exactly.
So, but being a history major in college and doing just paper after paper after paper across a diverse scope of
Mm-hmm.
histories that I researched, I
Mm-hmm.
became very adept at it. So
Right.
I enjoy the research. It's a
Oh,
little
I do too.
it's a little dismaying when you're sitting down to a writing session and you want to knock out like 2,000 words or whatever, and you just go down the research rabbit hole. Next thing you know, you've got like 300 words, in a 3-hour period. It's like
I've gotten to the point of where, okay, now I need to, what was trench warfare like? Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the gas attack? What did they use to sound the gas attack?
Right.
Was that little wooden thing that they turned around?
Yeah,
was it a clinger? Well, what, I want to make it, correct.
Right.
Because it's going to add to it. But no, I agree too. So your books sound fascinating. So where can anybody find you? Where are you at?
Oh, so I'm on. So you could get me in in the retail stores for sure.
Okay.
Barnes and Noble. You can order them through like Target and Walmart and stuff. They don't have them on the shelves there,
right.
but they offer them online. Of course, Amazon, Books A Million carries it as well. So all those places, you can go straight to Macmillan and order it from the publisher as well.
Is that Macmillan Press?
Macmillan USA is the overarching.
So, I think at one time, so I used to do tech editing for Q Publishing.
Okay.
On all their Microsoft series of books, I used to do all the tech editing. And
all
then
right,
I helped write a book from there. But I think I think they were bought by Macmillan. And I lost that person's name that I was working with all those years. I would love to be able to contact her and say,
sure,
hey, I'm doing this. Can you help me out with that?
Can you go walk across the hall for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So Tor is an imprint of Macmillan.
Yep.
They do a lot in the science fiction fantasy space. And then Forge is their little subsidiary that does like the thriller, military thriller space underneath them. So I'm Tor Forge, but Macmillan's like the overarching parent of that. And then, I always have to say this every podcast I do, independent bookstores, go in there, even if they don't have it on the shelf, they can get it for you. It's usually there in a couple days, but especially with today being Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And, tomorrow will be Black Friday and everybody's going to be buying from the conglomerates, but, the local shopping, what is it, like Saturday?
Definitely.
Saturday, I think, is the big shop local support. So, get out there and support your independent bookstores as well.
Excellent. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you two Army guys talking.
Yep.
And two armor type guys talking too, so even better.
Oh yeah, you put us, if we didn't have time limits, we'd be here all day. But
we're talking about
we
stuff.
both got turkey to get to, so
excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure, Tim, talking to you.
Yeah, really. Great time.
And folks, go out there, check his books out. Check his what's your website?
Oh, it's trhendricksauthor.com.
Okay.
I'm also on Twitter at _Hendricks, HENDRICKS. And then on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, it's all the same username. It's Read, READ, Hendricks.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, folks, go out there, check his books out. They sound very interesting. They're not taking place overseas; they're taking place at the home front. Yep. So just watch the news.
Right in your own backyard, and keep your fingers crossed it doesn't actually come to pass.
Exactly. Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure. Again,
all right,
happy Thanksgiving, and wish you all the best success.
Yeah, same to you. Take care.
All right. Yeah.